What's up, everybody? My name is Cody Yard, and I am the host of The Buzz with the Fuzz. It's Apple Valley's Police Department podcast. We're going to do some fun stuff with this thing. We're going to do chatting with the chief. We're going to do some Q&As, and we're going to do some longer format podcasts where we sit down with folks from specialty units, and you guys get to learn about who they are and what they do. I got my start in journalism back in 2002 as a combat correspondent in the United States Marine Corps. Really excited to be the host of this podcast here with the police department, and I'm really looking forward to bringing you some new fun facts and information that you might not know about Apple Valley's police department. So stick around, buckle up, and let's have some fun. Welcome back, folks. Again, my name's Cody. You heard that in the intro, and today I have the distinct pleasure of speaking with a good friend of mine. Myself and this officer, we actually went to skills program together, and a lot of people called us the old married couple at skills because
many years ago.
Yeah, a long time ago. So why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Cody. My name is Josh Gerving. I'm one of the sergeants at the police department. Like Cody said, we started out together, went to skills, had a couple classes together before that. After that, at that time, I was working as a CSO for the city of Apple Valley. Finished up school. Was fortunate enough to get hired as an officer at Apple Valley. And then I went into the high schools after I worked patrol for a few years. Went into the middle school as an SRO and as well as the high school. And then a short time later after that, I got promoted to sergeant. And I'm been here for almost 13 years. The last 6 have been working in patrol as a sergeant.
Yeah, right on. And then as a patrol sergeant, what are some of your duties? What are some of the things that you've done in that capacity?
Yeah, so when I first started as a sergeant, right, it's a new role. You're obviously a supervisor working patrol on the streets with the guys and gals. Since the last 6 years, I was asked to be one of the peer support coordinators, I guess you could call it, many years ago by our now current chief, Francis. And what that entails is you go to a 40-hour class to be certified in the state of Minnesota as a peer support counselor. And we'll dive into it a little bit. I don't cross-reference with our patrol officers or patrol folks in any way, shape, or form. I'm more looking at giving them tools and helping our officers who are peer support counselors in any way, shape, or form that I can to make them successful. When it comes to the sergeant ranks, I stay within the sergeant ranks, so there's no crossing ranks when it comes to peer support.
Yeah, that makes sense because we want to make sure that there's obviously sergeants may have different things that they're bringing and keeping that within their own group, keeping the patrol officers separate. That way there's a distinct separation between supervisor and subordinate as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Which is important because you were a military guy as well.
I was, yeah.
So you know that fraternization is kind of a thing here and not here at Apple Valley, but like we have to be cognizant of fraternization where those lines get blurred.
Sure. Yep.
Where, and you and I have had this where, hey, I'm coming to you first as a friend, but secondly,
right,
I may have to come at you as a supervisor.
Right.
Which is, I think that's a very respectful way to do things. But for those folks who haven't been in the military, they may not also understand that there has to be that distinct separate piece, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yep.
Which I'm glad you brought that up because it's good to know that, the sergeants are taking care of sergeants, and then obviously patrol officers are taking care of those folks that are not supervisors in that capacity. So,
and I think peer support groups, when it comes to groups within our police department and across the state of Minnesota, this is still a relatively new thing, right? I mean, it's been here maybe 4, 5, 6 years, depending on the department. But it takes a while to build trust, and I think part of that whole thing with keeping those separations between sergeants and officers in the ranks structure is that trust part of it, right? So
totally.
We want to make sure that our officers are going to be utilizing our peer support counselors, and there's trust there to do so.
Yeah.
So that might come in, what you're explaining, that might come in where an officer might not feel comfortable coming to a sergeant and speaking about an issue that they may be having when it comes to mental health or anything like that, or they're having a hard time with a call that they went on. They may not feel comfortable going to the sergeant. Therefore, they have their officers and their fellow ranks to go to that have been trained in the same way that I have been.
Yeah. And so we've got a fair number of officers on the peer support team. I'm trying to think. It's right around 8,
Yep.
9?
Yes. I believe it's 8. Yep. And we actually added a few officers. This was kind of when I'm looking back at it, and I was asked to help kind of coordinate this and figure out a structure to it, I guess. You have to look at your department as a whole. So what I mean by that is how many veteran officers do you have? How many senior officers do you have? Who kind of is in the middle there, that they're still vets, but they're not the guys who've been here for 20 plus years, right? Maybe they've been here, guys and gals have been here for 7 to 12 year mark, right? We got that group. And then we have in our department, we have a lot younger officers, some who are just starting, and then some who have been here for 4 or 5 years. Looking at that, how do we form that group, right? And how do we make it so each officer is, if they need to speak with somebody about something, who are they comfortable with? Because when I looked at this, it was, are our 20-year plus vets going to be comfortable talking to an officer who may be on the peer support team who's only been in this department and been an officer for 2 years, right? So there's kind of a balance that has to happen there, and making sure that peer support group that we have is very well balanced when it comes to that, so officers have the resources that they need.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, like, I'm on peer support, right? And I know that I can be an acquired taste.
Yeah, I think anybody can be an acquired taste, yeah.
But so some people may be comfortable coming to me and talking to me about something that they experienced, whereas other officers may look at me and say, oh, you know what, I don't feel comfortable talking to Cody. Thankfully, there's somebody else on the peer support team that I can go to and have that ear,
right,
to, because one of the other, and I'll bring her up, one of the other things about the peer support thing that you have spearheaded as well is having mental health professionals as part of the checkup from the Neck Up program, which we can get to. But Rachel Peterson, I've known her for quite a while, and she would always say, pain shared is pain divided, and joy shared is joy multiplied. Right. And so that's ultimately, like, we just want to get to that point where, like, we don't want people walking around the police department going, man, I'm just really struggling and I don't have anywhere to, like, offload some of this. Right.
And I think it's a very good, this is a very good time to explain, right, the distinction. Why do we have a peer support? Why does a police department have a peer support team?
Yeah.
For those of your listeners who will listen to this, I guess the best way to describe a peer support team is exactly the title, right? You have a group of peers who are trained in a class, sometimes up to 40 hours, that are able to help distinguish when they can help that person and when they need to get that person some extra help, and know where those boundaries are and where not to cross them, and where to, play in that realm, if you will. That's very important. When we have our trainings and we do that, we send our folks out to folks who are licensed in the state of Minnesota to give that class. And then our folks are considered licensed peer support trainers, right? Or not licensed, but they're peer support counselors, if you would.
Sure.
I don't even know if counselor is the right word. They're a peer, right? They've been trained on what they should do to the escalation of things.
Yeah.
What if somebody is sharing with somebody?
Right.
Because it might be as simple as, we had a crash on Cedar and 147th, a bad crash. Every officer, we're humans just like everybody else. So every officer will look at that crash, maybe depending on the severity of it, in a different way than another officer would.
Right.
So, like an example, you and I go down this crash, and it's a really bad crash, right? It could be, let's say it's a fatal crash. I'm a person who is married and I have kids myself. If kids are involved in that, I may look at that a little bit different than somebody who does not have kids, right?
Right.
Because that's going to impact me more than it would someone else. So that's a distinction of where somebody might utilize our peer support team and say, hey, I'm really struggling with this call. We had this crash, and I'm getting woke up at night because of this now. Or, I'm having a hard time coming to work because of this, because I don't want that to happen again, right? So a peer support member would help that individual discuss that.
Right.
And point them in the right direction to maybe a licensed clinician or somebody who can help them beyond what we are trained to do as a peer support person, right? We're trained to have that distinction in that and be there for them, but then maybe escalate that to give them the next tier help, right? Because we want healthy cops. Because when you think of health, most people think, well, physical health, right? Well, physical health and mental health go hand in hand. So being able to recognize that somebody's hurting at work and getting them the help that they need to be able to process that and then
Right.
come back to work and function again, where they should be, because we don't want something bothering somebody so much where it's affecting their job.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And
yeah.
that because what we've seen in the past is, I think about that state trooper out on the East Coast. I don't remember where he's from, but it's the famous video of like he was trying to pull somebody over for speeding. Somebody else is impeding that. He pulls that guy over, has marijuana in the car, and he's like, is it in the dispensary container? No, it's not. Well, now you're effed, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that guy was like trooper of the year multiple times, had no discipline on his
hmm
record,
hmm
has that one incident on the side of the road, and ultimately was the demise of his career. He retired shortly thereafter
hmm
based on the discipline, and maybe not based on the discipline, but like I think about that where that's that one day where he's having a bad day,
Right,
right? And has a blow up. And that's what we're trying to minimize
right,
happening here
right,
with our peer support team. We want to make sure that our officers are as mentally healthy as possible to go out, work the road, take the calls as they come into them, have interaction with the public. But then I think, and we've had this discussion where it's about going home
right,
and then feeling healthy at home
right.
because we see a lot of things in this job that we carry with us and we can take that home and that affects folks at home in their personal lives just as much as it does in their professional lives here.
Correct, yeah. And you can, mental health is something that you can't see, right? You
Right?
can see physical health. You can see if your buddy put on 10 pounds and be like, whoa, dude, what's up, But
Mm-hmm.
you can't always see the mental health. You can pick up the cues on it. Like if we, as officers, we get to know our shift partners pretty well, and we can understand if they're having a bad day or something's bothering them, right? But sometimes those things get hidden and they get pushed down pretty deep. And that's to your point. We
Yeah.
want good, healthy cops doing this job because we don't need anybody having blow-ups and making, wrong decisions. We want them to be focused and vigilant in everything that they
Yeah.
do. So,
Dude, I was just listening to the Joe Rogan podcast yesterday and Evan Haffer, the Black Rifle Coffee guy, was on there.
oh, sure.
And he was talking about some of his first time in combat.
hmm
And he had somebody come up to him and say, "Hey, psychology is more infectious than the flu."
Yeah, that's a good point.
Which is like I heard that yesterday and I was like, man, I should if I hadn't have been bebopping around the city in my squad, I would have pulled over and written it down.
Yeah, right.
And that might not be the direct quote, but like to hear that, and we talk about like we give partners crap like, "Oh, they're negative, weird."
Right.
Or, somebody's like, "Hey, I turned over a new leaf. I am trying to be positive about everything."
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because you can see that when people start making those changes, it's really interesting how they engage in conversation.
hmm Very
So,
true. Yeah, that's very true. Because this job is, and people might ask, well, why do cops even need this, right? Why do they need mental health support, or why do they need that extra step to help them do their jobs? And there's been multiple studies done, especially in the military, where we send our troops overseas and they fight a war and they come back and we've learned that, oh boy, something's not okay with this guy or gal,
mm-hmm.
and it had to do with their deployment, right? And they've learned that they need to make sure that those soldiers have an outlet when they get home. It's kind of the same way with officers. One of the things I really love about this job is I go to work every day and never know what's going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And everything is different. Things might be the same, but they're never exactly the same, if
Right.
that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So the excitement of being able to go and help people and also not know what would happen that day, it's not a desk job, right? So we see so many things all the time in different ways, whether it be on medicals or crisis calls, mental health calls, right? After that call, we have to learn how to ourselves as a person digest that,
Yeah.
right? So that's why it's important for not only for our officers all across the United States, but our military folks as well. As you know,
Yep.
you were
Yeah.
in the military, so
Yeah. And the impact of and I talk about this because I do some presenting on like patrol response to crisis intervention, mental illness calls, that sort of thing. I talk about it fairly regularly about how, coming back from Iraq, IEDs was a big thing when I was there in 2005. And like, I don't worry about the road blowing up going to get groceries at Target.
Right.
But I've been involved in a number of critical incidents, and I have to drive by those spots.
Right.
Right. And I mean, one happened right here at 147th and Galaxy, and I have to drive by it 100 times a day when I'm working.
Yeah.
You don't get to minimize the exposure to those critical incidents
Right.
like like I don't drive through Fallujah every day.
Right.
So that doesn't affect me and doesn't have the compound effects that the critical incidents that I've experienced here have.
Yeah.
I think the last stat that I read was police officers experience on average throughout their career 188 critical incidents.
Right.
When the average citizen in their lifetime would experience 2 to 3.
Yeah. And I would probably argue too that's even high, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
maybe.
Potentially.
Because you finally get, as an officer, right, when it comes to mental health or when it comes to things that become normal for you, normal for an officer, which is not normal for someone who's not been in the military or been an officer, normal to you, to a citizen who maybe would do a ride along with us. Say we were to go to a call and handle a situation, somebody's, amped up on a disturbance, right? We go down to the transit station and we handle this. We walk in there, right? Calm, cool, and collective. And we handle what we got to handle, and then we figure out a resolution to it, and we walk out. Or if you'd put somebody in that position, a lot of times somebody who's never had this experience is going to go, whoa, what is going on?
Right. They don't want to insert themselves into the conflict.
Right. They don't want any of that conflict. So a lot of times in this job, we have to insert ourselves into that conflict daily, because that's what we have to do to resolve the situation, because citizens are calling us to say, hey, we need help down here. Right. So for us, then, that becomes a normal, everyday thing. I remember years ago when I was working patrol, my father-in-law came on a ride along with me and made a traffic stop one night. Normal, nothing's ever routine, right? But we like to call them routine traffic stops. Individual, a couple people in the car, and the driver was revoked, right? In our world, looking at that, like, okay, well, we'll write the citation. If there's a licensed driver in the car, they can take the car and drive away, or we get tow the car, whatever it may be. I come back to the car and I sit in the seat and I'm running the license, and my father-in-law is like, man, that was crazy. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, you're walking up to a car and you don't even know who's in the car, what's in the car. I'm like, well, yeah, right? Yeah. So those things, we get trained on those things though, right?
Yeah.
We're fortunate enough to have very good trainers here, a very good training unit that trains us how to handle situations and do those things. But things that are not normal become normal to us.
Right.
And then we have to figure out an outlet to resolve that, to bring us back to normal. Because you hit it earlier, which is a great point. How are we as officers, how are we as cops when we leave here and we take our uniform off, jump in our cars, go home, and then have to interact with our families? Right?
Yeah. Right.
That's a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
So are we treating our families horrible because of the job, and what kind of interactions are taking place, right?
Yeah.
And when I'm saying that, what I'm talking about is like short-tempered, right? Or things like that you wouldn't as a person, you wouldn't normally do those things, but now you have frustrations from work and the things that you saw or the things that you did that night, right?
Loss of interest,
yeah,
right, in things that you would normally enjoy, right? Like, I think that's a big thing too. Like, the physical health side of this impacts, like, that mind-body connection is so huge for us. Because if you are able to work out and do things, it releases the natural endorphins that create happiness and bring you pleasure.
Right.
And when we are so used to functioning in this high stress job where cortisol and stress are the main drivers, and then the adrenaline dump of going to a call. Like, last night I went up to West St. Paul and helped them look for somebody who fled from a scene with my dog. Right. And the interesting piece of that is, driving lights and sirens up 35 to 494 into West St. Paul at speeds where people are like, well, that's unsafe.
Right.
That's not the adrenaline dump. The adrenaline dump is getting my dog out and then going into the dark woods
Right.
and trying to find somebody who's hiding in the woods.
Yeah. Because you don't know what you're going to find.
Yeah, because it's the unknown.
Right.
But then, like, afterwards last night, I was like, I don't know. No big deal.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Whereas somebody else who, like, what? You went into the woods with nothing but a dog dragging you in the direction of a bad guy? That's scary.
Yeah.
And then I come back, hang out, an hour later, hey, can you come up here and help us search this car for drugs?
Yeah.
Use your dog. And I'm
Right.
like, yeah, sure, no problem.
Yeah.
You know? And it's just business as usual.
Right. Not to mention the 17 monsters that some cops are drinking and
Right.
all the other stuff they're putting in their body to try to stay awake, or, you know, the night shift folks or the mid guys, right? And gals.
And then pile on a newborn at home.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Or, you know, kids with sports practices to get to and all that stuff. And,
Right.
you know, I think about, man, I got home at 3 a.m. My kids are up by 7:30 and I get them up and get them to school. And then I come home and take a nap and I come back to work, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Yeesh.
Yeah.
Like the broken sleep piece of that too.
Right.
You know that broken sleep is unhealthy.
Right.
But so many people do it.
Yep.
And it's not just our profession that does that.
No.
I think what we're really learning is that the public demands so much of us.
Mm-hmm.
They want us to be robotic in how we handle calls and situations, right? But then they also want us to be human.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not allowed to make mistakes.
Yeah.
We have to be robotic in how we make decisions based on the call in front of us.
Yep.
And they have to be fair and consistent with no deviation. But then they also go, hey, but you have to be human.
Right.
Okay, well, which would you prefer? You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Because if you want us to be human, we are going to have an emotional reaction to the situation in front of us,
Right.
which could drive our decision making.
Correct.
The hard piece of that is we have to understand our emotional reaction to the situation and what we're bringing to that call.
Right. Yeah.
And so
it's kind of like what you're explaining, right? Is like, not that we have to be perfect, but we have to be perfect.
yeah, perfect.
You know what I mean?
That's a perfect description.
So we have to go out there and be, and we have to. I mean, this is a profession of making sure that we do things in the right manner,
Right.
and be professional, and work through things that are difficult to come to the best resolution that we can, right?
Right.
And that's a great expectation that the public should have from us. But I think what sometimes gets missed is that repeated calls, which this is what we signed up to do. I'd rather be doing nothing else in my life than this job right now.
Same.
And we came into this profession and we do it, and that expectation is there, and that's great. And we will honor that expectation and always act in that manner and do that. I think the thing that gets missed is when we continually add the high stress calls, sometimes going nonstop every night or every day, going from call to call, and the different things that we see, and then trying to do all of those calls in the right manner and handle them professionally, which is what we're supposed to do. At the end of the night, sometimes all of that stress comes together and just can be overwhelming.
Right. Yeah.
So that's what brings us back to having an outlet for our officers to keep them mentally healthy. So our peer support counselors, as well as Rachel Peterson with Peterson Consulting and Scott Marks with Least, they both have great teams. Also, what we do with those folks is once a year we have check-ins with them, right? And we can talk about anything we want with them. What's going on in our lives, in the job, what's stressing us out. They will meet with us as many times as they need to throughout the year to help us get back on track. They will give us tools to utilize to be able to help us get more mentally healthy and get back to where we need to be to go back out and do our jobs, which is a great thing. So along with that, you touched on a little bit earlier, the physical side of that is just as important as well, right?
Yeah.
Physical and mental health go hand in hand.
Yeah.
They just do, right? So we've been working a lot with trying to figure out, well, how can we balance that? Lieutenant Zahar here at our police department has come up with a great jiu-jitsu program for us. And so officers can utilize that, as well as just recently we put together a program with Surprise Endurance. So Johnny with Surprise Endurance, I've been working with him, myself and our deputy chief have been working with him for the last 3-4 months. we got a program put together where Johnny is able to work with officers to help them stay physically fit.
Right. Yeah.
Because and I can speak to this as a testament, if you're not physically fit to do this job, it makes the job that much harder. It makes the stress that much harder. If you're not mentally fit, it's the same thing. So when you bring those two together, and people know what I'm talking about, when you're working out and you feel good, and you show up to do the job, and you're mentally fit at the same time, man, that's awesome. You're a rock star, right? And that's what we're striving to do at Apple Valley PD, is not only hire our good cops and send them through the training process to make sure they are good cops, and then have them go out to do the job, but take care of them. And that's a huge part of retention. I mean, I don't know the exact number, but it's a very large number to hire an officer, send them through the training program, put uniforms on them, train them every year. That's a very large number that the city is paying to keep our streets safe, right? And if we lose that officer, then it's like we're starting all over.
Right.
Right? So keeping them physically and mentally fit is going to keep them on the job, which goes back to retention. Because we all know, looking at law enforcement today, it's very hard to hire officers. It takes a lot to do that now. Where before, when you and I started,
Yeah.
boy, it was a lot more difficult.
Right.
Yeah. To get a job.
It was, I remember before I think there were 100 people who took the test for here in Apple Valley when I applied.
Right.
But I remember I applied for Bloomington just before that, and there were 600 people that took the test and 105 first round interviews.
Right.
For probably 10 spots.
Right.
And now we've got, I don't know how many officers we need to get back to fully staffed, 3, 4, whatever the number is. We just have an open hiring process.
Yeah.
You can apply whenever you feel like it.
Right.
It used to be a window.
Yep.
And
I think in today's age, right? I'm an old guy, right? So when I look at this, coming from the military, being a cop, a lot of times you're talking about stress. You would go on calls back in the day. I don't want to date myself too much, but going back in the day, you'd go on a stressful call, or you'd go on a bad crash, or you would, have something that you had to deal with that was very stressful, and you dealt with it. And then after the fact, you had all this stuff going on inside your mind, and people would just look at you and be like, "You're fine. It'll be okay. Tomorrow's a new day. Don't worry about it."
Yep.
And that's where we were falling short in the sense of taking care of our officers, because officers, like I said earlier, are human just like everybody else. There's a crazy statistic out there that talks about when most officers will work till they're 55, right? The state of Minnesota, it's when we can retire and have our pension and things like that. Cops aren't living that much longer after 55.
57, I think, is the average.
And so the reason for that is, think about all the stress that gets put on your body when you go to these calls. That's not just affecting you mentally, but it's affecting your cardiovascular. It's affecting everything inside of your body. So we have officers who are just so excited to retire and enjoy their lives with their family. I mean, 55 years old is so young, And we have cops that are getting out and retiring now, and they're dying so early.
Well, yeah. I mean, think about just in general, the average lifespan for a male in the United States is 73 right now.
Yeah.
Right? That's a crazy, crazy thing to look at, because that's only 18 years past our retirement.
Right.
Which, the running joke here is to outlive your pension.
Yeah. Right.
And I say that's a running joke because not many of us do it. When these officers retire at 55 and they make it, 18 months to 2 years past their retirement date, and they die of a cardiovascular event, right?
And that's a shift in the culture, right? So from when you and I started, it was, just tuck that deep down inside and keep on going to the next one.
Yep.
To, okay, we need to change this culture of being able to accept and ask for help.
Right.
And that's a hard thing to change.
Yeah.
That's a very hard thing to change, because some may still look at it as like, I'm not going to ask for help because I don't want to be perceived as a weak person.
Right.
Well, you're not weak, because the goal of our department is to keep you physically fit and to keep you mentally fit.
Yes.
And if we can do that for you, not only are you going to have a good long career, not only are you going to be able to retire at 55 or earlier, whatever you decide that you want to do, right? But you're going to be able to enjoy, 20, 25, hopefully more years with your family after the fact.
Yeah.
That's the goal, right?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
we work hard to get to that spot.
Right.
Well, let's give people the opportunity to enjoy that life after the police department.
Right.
So, I think Greg Dahlstrom said it years ago when we started talking about the peer support program, is that the police department owes it to their friends and family to give these officers back to them as whole as they possibly can be, right? And so that's a pretty good place to stand on in terms of like why we're doing this program. We owe it to the friends and family of our officers to give it back, to give those officers back as whole as they can be.
Yeah.
And healthy.
Yep.
So.
And that's a big shout out to our administration, right? They're shifting that culture and they're making that change. And not only are they just, their actions are speaking louder than their words, right?
Yeah.
So they want to make sure that we're all taken care of, right? So that's a huge thing. And my goal as the peer support coordinator is to do as much as I can for our officers to keep them in that spot, right?
Yeah.
To keep them healthy. And I mentioned sharp performance, or surprise endurance a little bit earlier, and that's another testament to our department to take care of our folks, because we need to be healthy. And if you look at it in a longevity standpoint, if you hire an officer, let's say day one, right, and they work 25 years, and in between those 25 years you've kept them healthy and they have that great long career, not only are you saving that person and helping their family, but if you want to look at it on a different side, you're saving the city a whole bunch of money, because now they're not having to go get a new cop, you know?
Yeah. I mean, but the other thing that you're saving on is potential for discipline.
Correct.
Ensuring that we have healthy cops responding to calls reduces the liability of that officer.
Yep.
Right? Because an unhealthy cop out there taking calls can create more liability based on their interaction with the public. Oof. And that's scary. That's where we see those incidents that tend to ripple through society, right?
Right. Yep.
And so you look back and you go, well, where was the miss?
Yeah.
And so
and we're getting there, right? We're figuring that part out.
Yeah. You talked about surprise endurance.
Yes.
And Johnny's a fantastic human being, and I, like you said, you've been working with him, and I've been working with him since early June, which comes right on the heels of a pretty significant critical incident that I experienced. I hadn't been running, doing any of that stuff, hadn't been taking care of myself physically, and Johnny comes along, and then I'm all of a sudden I'm running 27 miles in a 12-hour endurance event, and he's got me prepping for a marathon now.
Yeah.
And you can see the things. He's got tangible results.
Right.
And so I really hope that, for our department's sake, that officers really dig in deep, and like we just added a couple of people for a wellness program, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So that's like they're going to help out with that. We've got, with our new building, we've got some really great stuff coming in there in terms of workout equipment and that sort of thing. So we're really going chips in on taking care of officers physically as well.
Right. Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah. So when we do get our new facility up and running, we are going to be able to utilize our gym for purposes of that, right? To keep our folks physically fit. And you're right. Johnny has this, Johnny's a great guy, and he has this mentality of taking care of people. Mm-hmm. And he's done a lot of things in his career too. So yeah, no, great person. He cares. That's the biggest thing, right? And good things are going to come from all of this. I remember looking back when Captain Francis, now Chief Francis, came to me and asked me to do this. I was like, okay, this sounds pretty cool. Let's do it, right? And I go to the training, and probably when I really started learning the most about peer support and the impact, peer support groups within police departments, along with your clinicians that you have that are separate from your peer support groups, right? I started digging into this, and I went back to school and I wrote my paper that I wrote on peer support.
Yeah.
So I really dug into how does the state of Minnesota look at peer support groups, because there's statutes that cover peer support groups, and what is affecting cops the most, right? And the more I dug and the more I looked into research, the more I found it was the same thing. is your officers mentally and physically fit? Because if they are, they're going to be great cops because they
Yeah.
can show up and make, sound decisions and they're not stressed out about the call that they were just on or whatever it may be. And they're going to look at things and handle them great. So those are big, huge key factors in all of this. I know we've said it 1,000 times, but our department is definitely, from when I was asked to do this to now coming forward, made leaps and bounds, right, to take care of our officers, which I think is huge. And you're right, the wellness side of it is something that we talked about and how we want to keep peer support on one side and wellness on the other, right? We don't kind of want to cross those things because we want folks to show up and work out and not have to talk about their feelings if they don't want to,
Yeah.
right? They just want to show up and they want to work out and
Yeah.
get their workout in, and then if they need to talk about other things, then you have the peer support side of it. So I also learned in my research that keeping those things separate is very positive across the country when it comes to policing and how different departments have set these programs up.
Yeah, so you said you wrote a paper on this. So, you went back to school for your master's degree.
I did, yeah.
And what's that in?
Police leadership.
Okay.
Yep.
And so you wrote your final program paper on peer support.
Correct.
Yeah, right on. So, like, you have done the digging and
A lot, yeah.
the academic piece to researching all of this.
Right. And it comes down to, right, during the research, it always comes down to have a department that is successful in these things, peer support, wellness, taking care of their officers. There has to be buy-in, right?
Yeah.
And that buy-in will come, right? It's like anything else. It's like, I kind of joke about it. It's like when I get ready if I decide to go buy a new truck, I got to get my wife to buy in, right? That's not always easy. Trust me.
Yeah.
So, but we've gotten there now, right? We've gotten there where our officers have seen that asking for help is okay, right?
Yeah.
And we're getting to that point now where it's like officers are like, they've come and asked me questions about this new fitness program and Johnny and Surprise Endurance, and these officers may already be very well physically fit.
Mm-hmm.
But also the great thing is, well, they'd ask the question about nutrition. Can you help me with that? Yeah, I can help you with that.
Right.
Right. So there's so many different things that he can do to help fine tune what you're trying to achieve in your goals and to keep you healthy. So all really good things that are taking place.
Yeah. It's a big shift in lifestyles here at the police department.
Right.
Right. I mean, you start getting everybody on board eating healthy, and the cool part is, and I don't we're not an unhealthy agency. We don't have people bringing McDonald's
Right.
or fast food into the briefing room to eat
Right.
on the regular basis.
Yeah.
But, and if they are going, it's healthier options that they can find out there, which is really great to see. Ultimately, we don't want people rolling into gas stations buying bags of chips and eating roller dogs and that sort of stuff.
Right.
And, it's not really a great source of nutrition.
Yeah.
It's short-term energy, but not long-term good for the body. We're blessed to not have a lot of people who do that. Like you said, fine-tuning those things and really having people from those 20-plus year officers all the way down to the new folks that we've hired within the last year, having access to somebody who can help them with that is huge.
Right.
And especially somebody that's outside of the agency.
Yeah.
Right? There's no... If I go to somebody outside the agency, whether it's Least or Peterson Consulting or Surprise Endurance, they're a safe space for me to go ask those questions without judgment or without fear of repercussions. And that's a huge thing for us because, for the first 5-6 years that you were here and that I was here, we didn't have that option.
Right.
And so I remember after the pursuit that I was involved in, like, hey, I'd like, I have a relationship with a mental health professional. I'd like to see them regarding this incident. And one of the questions that I got was, did you get them through EAP?
Sure.
No. This is somebody that I'd sought on my own outside of, like, not through employment or anything like that. And the response was, well, we can cover the time that you're there. We'll pay you for the time that you're there, but you foot the bill for that, which not a dig on the agency at all.
Right.
Just a different perspective on how we looked at mental health.
Right.
So, and had I gone through EAP, all of that would have been completely covered.
Yeah.
I just felt comfortable going to this person because I had a pre-existing relationship
Right.
with them.
Yeah. And I think that's part of Peterson Consulting and Lease Services is that people will tend to find somebody that they like to talk to. For me, I like to talk to Rachel. And so you do start to form that relationship with somebody.
Right.
You have to be comfortable talking with somebody to be able to get down to the root of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can put me in a room with somebody that I don't know, and I'm not going to tell them things that
Right.
that are going on in my life that I would tell Rachel. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So you form that relationship with somebody, and you start to trust that person, and then that's when that help can really come out.
Yeah.
Because Rachel, or at least have those tools to be able to help you figure out what that is
Right.
and how to fix that
Yeah.
to get you back to where you need to be. So relationships are huge, and I think that's a great part of police departments recognizing that we need that, and it's not just telling you to, pat you on the back and telling you you'll be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Your partners on the street, and things have changed, and they've changed for the better all across the board. So yeah, we've done a good job here, and I always like to look at it as it's a work in progress. I want to make it so I like to take care of people myself personally.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to, peer support or a wellness program, I like to take care of people. I like to see them healthy. I like to see them show up to work and smiling, right? And you're having a good shift, and you're working together to solve problems. Because if you have that, your agency is going to be successful.
Yeah.
It just will. So working through all those things with different people and caring about people is a big thing. So we've done a good job at that, and we're going to continue to build on that. My goal, just as everybody else's goal here, I want to give our officers resources to be able to handle the things that they need to handle, so that in this time of having a difficult time hiring officers from outside this agency would look at us and go, wow, you guys are doing this, this, and this for your cops? I didn't even know that was possible. Well, come on over, Well, you need a job,
Yeah. We're trying not to poach, but
Yeah.
also we'd love to have you.
Yeah, and we want to keep our cops healthy. We want to keep them working. We want to have them have good lives outside this job. And there's a great distinction between being able to come to work and do your job, and then when you leave at night and take off your uniform, now you're a husband, a wife, a significant other, whatever it may be, and you're going home to your loved ones, and you're being that person.
Yeah, you're present.
You're present.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And you're not trying to you're not trying to shed the emotional or the stress that you have experienced throughout the day, because you've prepped your mind for, like, all right, cool, I'm done. Here's a de-stressing protocol thing that I'm just going to go through, whether that's I'm going to go pick up heavy objects and put them down for 10 minutes before I leave the building.
Yeah.
I'm going to go sit in the sauna or hit the cold plunge,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
But get rid of it, leave it there, because ultimately, like...
And those things help a lot. So they really do.
Yeah. Man, we've got a lot of things that peer support is doing, working on. We've got some cool things coming here.
Yeah, and we're always trying to think as a group, right? A peer support group. What can we do that's going to help and benefit our officers?
Yeah.
And we got a lot of good minds in that group, and a lot of people have come up with a lot of great ideas, and we're going forward, and we're going to make this a great thing for our department, and I want to make it the best thing across the state, right? So
Yeah.
people can see that and recognize that, and look at it and go, wow, Apple Valley's doing some great things for their officers. So
Right.
and that's the goal, right? And I think that's everybody's goal. And what I have found is sometimes it's not easy to find that next thing to help take care of your officers, because it's just not a magic wand, right?
Right.
There's a lot of things out there that people in departments are utilizing, but it also comes down to funding sometimes, So we have to look at what we have and utilize what we have, and we've come up with great ideas. So
Yeah, we've, in terms of like budget wise,
Yeah.
We've found some really creative ways to maximize
yes,
the peer support budget.
yes,
Because again, we've talked about all the great benefits of all this stuff, but that's the one thing that we hadn't touched on.
yeah,
Was the financial side of it.
right,
And, like with anything, it can be an expensive endeavor to take care of people, but I think at the end of the day, the benefits outweigh the costs
Yeah.
of taking care of people.
right.
you know?
Yep.
So anything else you want to talk about? Anything we haven't covered about peer support or the wellness?
I think that people just really need to understand that when you're looking at officers who are out there doing the job every day, they have to be taken care of too, right?
Yeah.
They're people.
Right.
Most of them are dads and moms and aunts and uncles and nieces and nephews, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're human just like everybody else. Humans make mistakes. We're not out there to try to make mistakes. We're trying to be out there and do the job professionally and in the right manner. But it's important for people to really know and understand that we're humans just like everybody else, and we need to be taken care of, and we need to take care of ourselves just like everybody else needs to. So I think that's important to be able to share that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. For us to receive a little bit of grace, we go out and we show people grace pretty regularly,
Yeah.
you know,
I would say that. Yeah. Yeah.
without expecting it in return.
Right.
Too.
Yeah.
So.
There's a lot of things that happen in this police department when it comes to officers and interactions with our public, right?
Yeah.
There is so much good that our officers do on a daily basis when it comes to taking care of our public.
And it just goes under the radar.
And it goes under the radar. But you know what? That's okay, because
Totally.
that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
We're not looking for the pat on the back. So there's so much good that happens every single day. And so when just to your point to the grace part of it, right? We're out here to do this job, do it professionally, do it in the right manner, take care of the citizens of Apple Valley, because that's what we're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
When they call us, we come.
Right.
That's our job. Whether it be a small thing where there's a squirrel in somebody's house, right? Or the big thing where somebody's calling us because there's guns and knives involved.
Yeah.
So, and everything in between. No call is too small, right? I was told that when I first started.
Yeah, I see it on the wall sometimes around here.
Yeah. So we're here to do our best and help the citizens of Apple Valley. So
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Well, hey, let's finish up with one final question.
Sure.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about wellness today without getting too crazy with the details of it.
Yeah.
What's your best de-stressing protocol, or what's your place where you find peace and get back to a good, healthy state? And I have an idea of what it might be, but I'm hoping that we're on the same wavelength here.
So are we talking like, I'm leaving work and there's a 10-minute routine I have before I leave work, or are we just talking about like, okay, I work for a week and now I'm going to go?
How do you take time off and recharge away from here?
Yeah, I guess for me, I've been I had a cop tell me one time, this was probably 3-4 months ago, and I never really thought of it this way. He was a retired state trooper, and he said that when he retired, his wife picked him up. He had to drop off his squad car, and she's asked him, how are you doing? He's like, you won't believe it. I feel like there's a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. And he said, the way he put it was something like this, not verbatim, but something. You don't know really how much this job affects you until you retire, until you don't have to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And he said it was just amazing because we show up and put the uniform on and do our things every single day, and we don't realize that things are affecting us, but they are. So my little piece of heaven is by my cabin. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, absolutely.
I got a small little cabin tucked back way in the woods with a little tiny lake on it. And
minimal cellular service.
Minimal cellular service. You can't get a hold of me unless I'm in the cabin because of the Wi-Fi. So we have a great schedule. We get 4 days off in a row every other week. I'll spend some time up there fishing, boating with the kids, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's great because you can just unplug, enjoy life for a little bit, get refreshed, come back and go to work,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. What's yours?
Oh, man. Lately, I've been finding I've been sorting some things out running, but without music.
Oh, yeah.
It's been a crazy shift. I've stopped running with headphones all the time.
Yeah.
Because, if you've got music going, it's a distraction. But if you're just out running and you end up running 7 miles, it's just you.
Yeah.
And you can sit in, if it's painful that day, great. You sit in the pain, you sort through that piece of it. But if it's just an easy run and you're just out for a run, you can really get into your head and get into your thoughts.
Yeah. There was one thing, I know we got to get going here, but there was one thing that, and I know that you had talked with Sergeant Cheetah not that long ago, right?
Yeah.
Did you guys talk about CIU and that kind of how that functions, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you guys talk about chaplain group at all?
We did.
Yeah,
Yeah, because
okay.
I told him that I said you wrangle the chaplains.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So they're a great asset for this police department as well, right? When it
Yeah.
comes to physical, mental,
Like,
emotional health.
right.
So we have a group of chaplains here that come in and take care of officers as well, and
Yeah.
they're always willing to take a phone call, and we've got to know
Yeah.
those folks a lot better too. So no, that's a huge part of it too. So you guys probably talked about that a little bit. So
We did.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
My way of recharging is spending time with folks not in this profession.
Oh yeah,
That's huge.
that's huge.
Having
man.
friends outside of the profession
Yes.
where I can go hang out and, talk about the wild or talk about hunting or whatever it is
Yes.
that doesn't surround law enforcement.
100%.
And, because it's just like with military vets, right?
Mhm.
Like you get two people from the military together, they start sharing boot camp stories.
Yeah.
Or most recently, like the war on terrorism, you get two vets together and they start sharing stories about combat deployments.
Right.
You get two cops together,
Yeah.
they can be from complete opposite ends of the state, and they
Yeah.
start sharing stories about their agencies.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I ran into one on vacation last March. I think maybe he might have been a Minnesota guy, different whole way up north, but somehow we gravitated towards each other, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's a thing. So
Yep.
yeah, no, super healthy to have that unplugged for sure.
Yeah. So, well, Josh, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it. We've been talking about doing this for quite a while, and
We have, yeah.
finally got a chance to sit down here. And
Yeah. Well, thanks for
So-
having me.
folks, if you have any questions, reach out to Sergeant Gerving here at the police department in terms of wellness program. And like we talked about, we're more than willing to talk about what we've got going and what we've got in store for the police department here. So,
Absolutely.
hey folks, we want this to be engaging for you as well, so please drop a comment wherever you follow us on social media. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to this podcast. Tell your friends, tell your family. We'd like to get this out to as many people as possible. We want people to know who the police officers of Apple Valley are. If you have questions or comments, something you'd like to hear about, reach out to us. Let us know. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to address some of those topics that you guys have questions about as well. We look forward to having you back next time.